Hello everyone. It's 2022 now, uh, February, and this year is the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War campaign. Now, what you're looking at here is my miniatures that I have for that war. They're a mixture. Originally, and we're talking well over 20 years now, probably 22 years ago. I picked up at a bring and buy at the local wargame show in Plymouth. About a third of these figures. They caught my eye simply because they were quite well presented and painted, and they were a kind of complete pick up and go game in a way. They'd all been painted adequately, not necessarily to my taste, but they were painted, and they were all based on these sort of balsa wood bases, based in groups, quite thick bases. I've kept some of the bases as they were, simply because the whoever painted them up and modelled them in the first place had gone to the trouble of cutting a lot of the figures in half and presenting them as though they were in foxholes and trenches like this. When I say they weren't necessarily painted to my taste, they're sort of primed in black and then just highlighted, so you probably won't ever be able to see on this camera, but the faces have just got sort of black recesses for the eyes and so on. And more than that, the actual colour of the uniforms for the Argentinian forces is not, I don't consider that to be representative of the colours of the period. It's too light. I'm not sure what paints they were using, but from what I've seen, colour photographs and so on, that the Argentinian uniforms were a lot darker than that. Anyway, that's sort of beside the point. As well as being on those bases, they were also all labelled up as though they had been painted up for some kind of presentation game. So most of the labels have gone, but you can see on this armoured vehicle here an example of how this one's labelled up as a Blues and Royals scimitar. Really, I got these quite cheaply, and I would have bought the collection just for the vehicles alone. But anyway, that was well over, as I say, well over 20 years ago, and it got me into wargaming, the Falklands War, and I added a lot to the collection. The figures I recognised, so I was able to get a lot more. They're from a range, they're 20mm, and they're from a range called, or they're mainly from a range called Combat Miniatures, and they are still available through Stonewall Figures, I think they're called, but you can still get hold of them. They do quite a lot of modern warfare figures, and they're usually labelled, the ranges are usually labelled by the name of the operation. So in the case of the Falklands War, that is Operation Corporate. So if you googled, if you were interested in getting any of these figures, if you googled Operation Corporate 20mm figures, you would soon come across Stonewall figures and combat miniatures in particular, and be able to find them on the internet. I've just been trying to sort them out for the purposes of this video, and they're still a little bit of a muddle. Over this side, these are definitely all Argentinians. As I say, I painted a lot myself and added to the collection, so you can see here the same figure. This one is original, that got picked up at the Bring and Buy, and this one is my own style of painting. And as I say, my figure is a lot darker and drabber than this one. In the middle, because I haven't quite sorted them out, luckily I found a note listing all the figures that I had, and you know, what they were and so on. But this group in the middle are basically Marines, but some of them are Argentinian Marines, some of them are British Marines, and I haven't yet gone to the effort of sorting them out, because for the time being they're just going to go back in the box anyway. But from the original ones I got from the Bring and Buy, I'm assuming this, and I think this is an Argentinian Marine because he has a black beret. My own version of the Argentinian Marines has a very dark green beret, but camouflaged clothing, whereas the British Marines, the original painter painted them with a very conspicuous kind of green beret and quite a light camouflage. My own interpretation of that, if I can find one, is yeah, I think this is the same figure. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that's this one is my own version of that figure, with a kind of, again, I've gone darker in virtually everything, which to me is more appropriate for the actual colours of the, you know, of the time, and the sort of damp, dark setting of the Falklands Islands. So they're a mixture there. Over this side, you've got the vehicles at the back. You've got a few figures. This one here is broken. It's lacking the barrel of the machine gun, so it's just spare part, really. You've got some special forces, so special boat squadron, SAS and so on, could be. They tend to have, you know, they tended to sort of select their own equipment and so on, so they could be used for quite a lot of different units. So I've got must have about 16 of those. Then you got the paras here, so quite a lot of those, and again, both my own and the figures that I bought pre-painted, and the originals got a very much brighter colours, lighter colours. So the red beret is a very kind of bright red, which didn't look quite right to me. See if I can find the same figure. Can't see one standing out immediately, but this is my own version of the painting style with a much darker beret. And then finally at the front, there are a few figures here that I bought. I think they're RK models, are they? They're another company that do 20mm kind of modern warfare ranges. Not a very high profile. I don't know if they're still around. I bought some figures, Korean War figures from them a few years back, and they basically sell through. They've got a website certainly, but I can't remember how I bought them. But I can remember you couldn't purchase them online. You had to send a written kind of order. So very outdated kind of way of purchasing the figures. But I think they're still around. I think if I remember rightly, he was down somewhere in Surbiton, was it? Somewhere like that, down in outskirts of London. But for those, I just had a few kind of heavier weapons like Milan, some Gustav. I'm not sure they even used them in the Falklands. What were they called? Gustav something. Let's have a look. Carl Gustavs. They're kind of like a bazooka type weapon, and some mini mortars and heavier machine guns and so on. In the pre-painted lot, I've got some powers with Milans, and again you can see on there how he's gone for a much lighter colour scheme. But anyway, all that, I've been talking now for quite a while, and that isn't really the reason I'm making this video. Fraser von Ketteringham put up a video quite recently, a day or two ago, talking about the question of, are there any periods that you wouldn't wargame? And this had already, because I'd been mooting playing a game with these figures to recognise the anniversary of the Falklands War. This is a subject that had already come up in conversation with a wargaming friend of mine before he put the video up. Now, I took these figures down to my local wargaming club, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago, to play a game with a friend of mine, and someone there came up to the table to look at the game and just expressed the opinion that the Falklands War was too kind of recent and too raw a memory for him to play it. And he said he knew people who had died, during the Falklands War, which is not an uncommon experience if you live in Plymouth, because it's a naval city, and a lot of the vessels that were lost and so on were based in Plymouth. But all the same, I kind of found, fair enough, he can make his own choices about what games he wants to play and what periods he wants to play, but I did find that slightly odd, because he is a massive World War II gamer, and to me there is really no difference between games set in periods that occurred during my lifetime and that occurred during the lifetime of my father. My father was a regular army soldier. He joined the army in 1932, and by the time of the Second World War he was a sergeant, and he fought right the way through the Second World War, and was probably, from his behaviour, I would say quite scarred by it, literally and metaphorically. But he had absolutely no problems at all with me playing with my Airfix model soldiers and wargaming World War II. And we're talking about, sort of 20 years on. We're talking about the 1960s, so 20 years on from the Second World War. And he gave me encouragement. He would, talk about, if I showed him the figures and that, he would talk about, his experiences in the desert, and Vicker explained Vickers machine gun teams and the use of mortars to me and all this kind of thing. So he didn't have any qualms about me wargaming. He never wanted to game with me himself, but I don't think that was because of any queasiness about it. I think it was mainly that he just wasn't that kind of, he didn't have those kind of interests. He wasn't interested in rolling dice. He didn't understand mechanisms for games, so he wouldn't even play board games, simple Waddington board games with me. So it didn't strike me as odd that he didn't want to war game. And I don't think it was from any upset that he had in his mind, although he was, as I say, very evidently upset by the war, but it didn't cross over into his attitude towards me wargaming. And when as I say, in a conversation I had recently with a wargaming friend of mine, I told him that I was thinking about playing a game, another Falklands War game. And he said exactly the same thing as this other chap at the War Games Club, that he thought it was too recent a conflict. He didn't have any close kind of connections to the war in any way, but we're talking 40 years on now, and bear in mind, when I started wargaming World War II, it was only 20 years on from my father's, own personal experiences during that war. So I found this even kind of this recent conversation, I found it even stranger. And I just wanted to kind of like chip my, two pennyworth into this kind of online conversation that Fraser began. If you watch a channel called Michelangelo, Karen on that has really summed it up to me, so I can recommend you go and watch her latest video. It may not be the latest one by this point, but by the point you watch this, but she summed it up very well, and I think I'll just kind of echo her opinion, which is, if you have those qualms about a period, then you should really have a hard think about why you wargame in the first place, because there is no difference at all. Wars were unpleasant businesses, no matter when the period. You could go back to the sort of Dark Ages or the ancient period. Wars were just as unpleasant in those days, and often more so. There were less rules of war, and the human experience was just as terrible. So I agree with that entirely, that if you say it's all right to wargame one period, but it's not all right to wargame another, then what you're really doing is dehumanizing the people that fought in the wars that you consider it appropriate to play. And what you're really doing is mixing up reality with games. You've got to draw a complete distinction between the two. If you were playing a war game and you were approached by someone, say at a convention or something like that, a member of the public who wasn't a war gamer at all, who came up to you and said they didn't think it was appropriate that you were playing a game that dealt with the subject of war, then I'm pretty sure you would have a ready answer as to why you wargame and why you enjoy doing so, and how you don't mean any disrespect to the generation that participated in that war. So really, you've got to take that attitude and transfer it to wargamers that say the same thing to you about a particular period. It's up to the individual what period they wargame, and it's a game. It's not meant to represent reality in any way. If it does, then you probably got a problem yourself. If you think you are recreating any of the horror of war, then you shouldn't be getting enjoyment out of that. So you should really think twice about, seeking help for it. Basically, if you're that sick as to want to recreate, tragedies and genuine suffering on the tabletop, then there's something wrong with you. So the only other aspect of this is, if you have been a serviceman and seen active service, then I can quite understand why you wouldn't necessarily want to wargame a period that you actually participated in. I can quite understand that. Equally, I think that you should understand that people that you do see playing those games have got no less respect for you than you have for the people who fought in the wars that you game yourself. So there shouldn't really be a problem there. But as I say, the problem arises, and Eric, the Yankee Wargamer, made this point in a reply to one of my comments on Fraser's video. He made this point that he has played games set during the Gulf War in which he took part, and he felt kind of upset by the attitude of the people that he was playing with, not with the actual subject matter of the game. It was with the off the cuff kind of remarks and derogatory remarks that some of those people that participating in the game made. And I think that is completely the point, that it shouldn't be a question of what periods are you happy playing. It should be a question of what is the attitude that you take to the game. So that could be on any subject. So, for instance, it would clearly be in extremely poor taste to play a World War II game where the object of the game was to burn a village down in Russia, or capture Jewish prisoners to send to the concentration camp or something like that. If you're playing games like that, then you should really get out of the hobby. So it's that sort of thing. That is the sort of thing that I just wouldn't do. No matter how brutal a particular war was, it doesn't stop me playing it. It would stop me playing, though, against people who relished the brutality of it rather than wanted to play a game for fun. So I think that's my point. So on that final point, I just wanted to show you something that I kind of remarked on as well from this matter of taste. And I always remember, I'm going to have to move the camera along a little bit at this point, just to show you this. Some of you older wargamers may recall this as well. This is, let's get the lighting a bit better. Miniature War Games magazine. from May 1996. On the cover, by the way, a picture of a Wars of the Roses display. I won't call it a war game because it's not. It's just figures set up in a kind of massed effect. But the Wars of the Roses is another example. A really horrendous, bloody conflict, traumatized the nation. Very kind of barbaric war, and yet people get complete and utter enjoyment at playing this period, as I do, and there's nothing. People don't have any qualms about that, but if you're going to take that attitude about war being an unpleasant business, then why is it that we can still enjoy the Wars of the Roses? Anyway, that's not the reason I got this magazine out. In this magazine, May 1996, there was an article, a game. I'm going to find it here now, but it was quite a long way back. Here we go. An article it was described as a sci-fi game because it's set in the future. It was set, I think the year is 2097. So about, we're a lot closer to that year now, but it's still set in the future. But the game was entitled "Tell Me Why I Don't Like Mondays," which is the opening lyrics to the Boomtown Rats song. And it was a game where a girl goes bananas and walks into a school and starts shooting people. Now, it's a reference in two ways to a shooting that occurred in San Diego, in Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego in 1979. I forget the girl's name. A 16-year-old girl. She lived opposite school, and she walked into the school and started killing people. And when asked why she did it, she said it was because she didn't like Mondays and she was basically bored. And that was where the Boomtown Rats took the title of their, the lyrics of their song from. So this is really bad taste. And it's not a game that I would enjoy playing, even though it's set in a kind of pretend world in the future. It's you've got to be pretty thick-skinned not to appreciate the sensitivity of this subject. Incidentally, I forget the girl's name, as I say, but 2022 is another landmark year because she is still in prison to this day, but she is eligible for parole in September of 2022. So this may come into the news later in the year. I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, really bad taste, and probably this article had been planned many months in advance. That's the only reason that you can excuse the fact that it came out in May 1996, but in March 1996 the Dunblane school shooting had occurred in Great Britain, which may still be one of the worst mass killings that's ever occurred in the British Isles. And you can just imagine, luckily for miniature war games, a minute proportion of the population read this magazine, still read it. But what a kind of calamitous juxtaposition, to have such a bad taste game at that time when people were still reeling from the Dunblane school massacre. So, as I say, if you're an older wargamer like me, you may well remember this article. But I just thought I would show that to you, to say, yes, there is a line over which you shouldn't step when you're wargaming, but it's nothing to do with the period. It's to do with what you take to the game and what it is that you enjoy in it. If you enjoy something like this, then you don't really belong in the hobby, is what I would say. And it's got nothing to do with personal kind of experiences of war or anything like that. It's to do with mentality, and you can understand that when you watch a channel like the Yankee Wargamer, because Eric is quite clearly a very sensitive and moral person, and he sort of has a very kind of mature attitude to this kind of thing. Anyway, that's my kind of response to Ron Ketteringham's video. Sorry I've whittled on quite a long time about it, but it's something that has kind of occupied my mind quite a lot over the years, and I wanted to have my say. And again, I don't sort of feel in a way that social media nowadays is conducive to this kind of conversation. So I'm going to police the comments on this particular video quite closely, and won't sort of tolerate any kind of contentious remarks, which is something that I've been doing recently on my channel in general. I did say about 6 months or so ago that it's something I was going to do, and it seems to be working quite well. But if anyone wants to make a stupid or derogatory remark, then you're not going to be able to comment on my channel after that, I'm afraid. So thanks very much for watching, everyone, and see you on a more light-hearted note on my next video, hopefully. Bye for now.